spent a lot of time, and the First Lady just went out with a test also. So whether we quarantine or whether we have it, I don't know.
Look at how this story unfolded and what is to come. On Tuesday, Donald Trump went head-to-head with Joe Biden at the first presidential debate in Ohio. A day later, the president held a rally in Minnesota. Close aide Hope Hicks travelled with the president a number of times during the week, including on Air Force One. And yesterday, she tested positive for coronavirus. That prompted President Trump and First Lady Melania to get tested, and they then returned positive tests. As the president is forced into quarantine at the White House, Vice President Mike Pence will take more of a public role. He has his own major engagement coming up on Wednesday when he's due to face Kamala Harris in the first vice presidential debate. The second presidential debate is now less than 2 weeks away. That takes place on the 15th of October in Miami, Florida. But there's now major questions about how and if that will take place as scheduled. And the third debate is set to take place on the 22nd of October in Nashville, Tennessee. Before that, all-important date in the calendar, Election Day on the 3rd of November. Our US correspondent Greg Milam is with us. Hello to you, Greg. Just hearing from the doctor here saying that if you do have COVID, then you have to quarantine for 10 days, which would, here in the UK, which would mean he would still be available to do that debate with Mr. Biden if he wanted to. But there's a long way to go between now and then, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And if it was 14 days here in the US, then that debate would pretty much be off now. And even if they decide to carry on with the campaigning, and there are just so many questions right now, still in the early hours, of course, here in the US, certainly in Washington, as they are awake and digesting this news about what this means for the election campaign, certainly, but what it means for the US in general, and the fact that Commander-in-Chief is quarantined in the residence at the White House, and how much he can continue to do the job. The insistence at the moment from him and the First Lady and from the doctors are that they are doing well, and that from the doctor saying he can continue without disruption to do his job. But it was an extraordinary couple of hours of uncertainty when that news broke about Hope Hicks's positive test, and then the confirmation from the president that he and the First Lady had tested themselves and were quarantining. And then just before 1 o'clock in the morning in Washington, that tweet from the president confirming it, and we can read you that tweet now. He said this, just before 1 a.m. in the morning, tonight FLOTUS and I tested positive for COVID-19. We will begin our quarantine and recovery process immediately. We will get through this together, is what he tweeted. And a short time after that, Melania Trump, the First Lady, put out this statement on Twitter. As too many Americans have done this year, the President and I are quarantining at home after testing positive for COVID-19. We're feeling good, and I've postponed all upcoming engagements. Please be sure you are staying safe, and we will all get through this together. So a similar message there. And we also had from the White House the statement from the physician to the President, Sean Conley, who put out this statement. I released the following information with the permission of President Donald J. Trump and First Lady Melania Trump. This evening, I received confirmation that both President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump have tested positive for the SARS-CoV-2 virus, COVID-19, of course. The President and First Lady are both well at this time, and they plan to remain at home within the White House during their convalescence. The White House medical team and I will maintain a vigilant watch, and I appreciate the support provided by some of our country's greatest medical professionals and institutions. Rest assured, I expect the President to continue carrying out his duties without disruption while recovering, and I will keep you updated on any future developments. So those are the official statements there. But of course, the questions that come from this, about a president who had consistently downplayed how vulnerable he was to this virus and how vulnerable other people were as well. Things like those rallies that he's been holding, even this week. You mentioned the one in Minnesota, thousands of people there, many of them not wearing masks, and the suggestion that he, throughout all of this, has offered pretty mixed messages to the American people. Well, he now is quarantining inside the White House, and he has been tested positive, along with the First Lady, for COVID-19.
OK, thanks for now. Thank you. More reaction to the news that President Trump and the First Lady have been diagnosed with COVID-19, joined by epidemiologist Dr. Eric Feigl, who is standing by in Washington. Hello to you. Good morning, very early morning where you are. Your thoughts initially?
My thoughts initially is it was actually just a matter of time. Because if you look at the debate, the one side of the aisle was entirely masked, the Democratic side, and the Republican side of Trump allies was completely not masked whatsoever. And you see that at all his rallies. He goes to all these crowded rallies with almost zero distancing, indoors or half indoors, and they're just not taking precaution. So it is just a matter of time. And it's very, very unfortunate, though, that this has had to happen in the middle of this pandemic.
What are the rules in the US if you do contract COVID? You need to stay at home, I'm guessing, for a specified period of time.
Right. You have to. So if you are positive, it's called isolate. You have to isolate. And the earlier gentleman is right that the infectious period after you have symptoms is about 10 days, but that's on average. So that's why you should probably wait much longer. The standard quarantine for those around you is 14 days. But I want to point out there's actually studies that show anywhere from 1% to 12% of the people, depending on the study, actually have incubation longer than 14 days. So people around him, his staff members, could actually have to maybe precautionary incubate for much longer. And so the question was, could he participate in the next debate? Theoretically, maybe, but I think in terms of political optics, it would just be the worst thing. It probably might even be a Zoom virtual debate, if anything.
So, sorry, just to clarify, if you do have COVID-19 in the US, if you have contracted it, what is the isolation period?
It is technically, you should isolate for 14 days. Now, there are sometimes some exceptions, but I don't think, Trump would want to try to get that exception because politically it would be very, very bad. And moreover, the infectiousness period is on average 10 days, but it could be longer than that after you have symptom onset. And the other worrisome thing is, where did he get it from? He didn't get it from his aide, Hope Hicks, because if she just got sick and they all both tested negative on Tuesday night before the debate, that means they must have gotten sick much earlier than that over the weekend. And so I think this epidemic in the White House is much larger, and the number of people that needs to be quarantined is quite large.
Okay. I'm guessing also Joe Biden must be quite concerned about whether or not to have the second debate. But given what you've just said, he was in contact with the president after the weekend.
Yes, that's the other big question people are asking. And it is possible. There is a narrow window in which you can, while testing negative and not showing symptoms, you can be infectious. It's in the pre-symptomatic phase. A large number of infections have been recognized to happen in pre-symptomatic. So there is a narrow window in which before you test positive and you don't have symptoms, you could be spreading it. Now, they were arguing a lot on stage, but they were quite a distance apart in actuality. But it was quite a long debate, as you know, and lots of shouting. So it's a non-zero risk, but I don't think Biden has it, given the combination of factors such as distance and that probably Trump had a very low viral load, if anything, then.
And if you were the president's physicians, what would you be doing from now for the next 10 to 14 days?
I think the key thing is obviously monitoring his symptoms, monitoring his blood oxygen levels, see if his symptoms are progressing, probably giving him the remdesivir that's been clinically proven to shorten the illness. Not dexamethasone, because that's only if you have ventilators or need oxygen. But we'll see how that progresses. And maybe convalescent plasma, which is obviously the doctors are going to offer him everything, the state of the art in medicine. But I think at some point the vice president may have to be at the ready if for some reason Trump may need oxygen and has to be intubated. It is the Wild West at this stage. We have no idea what the medical course will be. But I think for the most part, Trump should be okay with the best medicine that money can buy as the president of the United States. But again, he is 74 years old, so anything could happen.
And he is a man, and he is overweight.
Mm-hmm. Right. And those who have these risk factors definitely have higher risk of being hospitalized and going into ICU and intubated. So his weight is borderline obese. So I would say his risk factors and his cholesterol and all those things add and compound the likelihood of that with age. This is why we need to avoid COVID. We cannot chase herd immunity, as many people are advocating, to infect everyone and just shield the vulnerable. Clearly, shielding the vulnerable actually would mean a half or 2/3 of the US population, and perhaps in Britain as well.
And in the meantime, he could, sail through this.
Yes, theoretically you could, but with actually a lot of political damage, I think, because I'm in DC, and in terms of the politics and the optics, he was dismissing it, playing it down, as he says on tape. All these things politically so close to the final election day with 1 month to go, all this plays in a very, very, very negative light for him, that he cannot call it a hoax anymore. He cannot tell people to just don't worry about it, because he clearly himself is in this high risk pool and being closely monitored. So in certain ways, this blows open the conspiracy theories and torpedoes them that these numbers are fake or overblown epidemic.
Okay, thanks very much indeed for your expertise. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joined now by the First Minister for Wales, Mark Drakeford. Hello to you, Mr. Drakeford. Lots to talk to you about, but first let's talk about the President of the United States and the First Lady. Your thoughts?
Well, fascinating last interview, which I was able to hear. And obviously, your first thought has to be for the individuals, because they are now unwell, and we would send all personal best wishes to them. But the political ramifications from this must be very real. This is a president who has always downplayed the virus, acted, as you've seen in those rally pictures you were showing, as though it didn't exist. And this is bound to make people in the United States wonder about the quality of the leadership they've been offered over the last 6 months.
However, if he sails through this, then that gives more power to his elbow, saying that it's a virus that is easily combated.
Well, of course, it is possible that that might happen. I think your last contributor listed all the factors that suggest that that would be less likely, given the president's age, his underlying health conditions. Let's hope he does sail through it. On a personal level, that's what you would hope for him and for the First Lady. But I think it will bring a whole series of questions to the fore, which the president has tried to sideline during this election campaign. He's not wanted to talk about coronavirus, despite the 200,000 people who have died in the United States and so on. So I think the political ramifications will be real, however his own condition develops.
Meantime, in Wales, 2.3 million people are now living under lockdown out of a population, I think, of just over 3 million. I put it to the Minister, the Housing Secretary, earlier on today. I don't know if you managed to listen to him, Mr. Drakeford. And he was saying, nevertheless, even though it does look as though outbreaks are doubling in some areas of lockdown in England, that the measures are working. What would you say about the situation in Wales?
Well, we have early signs in those parts of Wales where those lockdown measures were first introduced, that they are beginning to have an effect. The virus is declining in those parts of Wales, not as fast and as reliably as we will need to see it, but nevertheless, the fantastic response we've had from local residents in those areas, really determined to play their part in allowing us to get back on top of the virus in those parts of Wales, is beginning to have an effect. And we will be planning with those local authorities in the coming week for how we will gradually be able to ease those measures as matters improve.
One of the measures in place is a 10 p.m. curfew, and you've actually taken that further than just pubs and hospitality. You said alcohol sales generally have to stop after 10 p.m. It does look as though that's an arbitrary time. Why have you chosen that time, Mr. Drakeford?
The time specifically is to make sure we've got consistency across the border and we don't have people trying to chase pubs being open in different parts of England and Wales. But we had very clear evidence here in Wales. During the early part of the evening, people going out to pubs and restaurants, behaving responsibly, having a good night out in a carefully regulated area. But a small minority of people later on in the evening, moving from pub to pub, trying to find the one that is open the longest. By the time they got to the end of that journey, their ability to remember where they had been, who they had been with, was really compromised. And when our track, trace, test system needed to get from them details of who they've been in contact with, they simply weren't able to provide them. So we've got a system that allows people who want a good night out and a responsible night out still to have that, but is reducing the risk of people who don't drink responsibly, find themselves unable to remember where they've been, and put others at risk. We've cut down on that. We don't allow alcohol to be served in supermarkets or in off licenses. We don't have a 10 o'clock out on the pavement rule in Wales. There's time for people to finish their drink, finish their meal, make an orderly exit. I think that system is working well.
Is there a warm welcome still for English people who want to travel to Wales?
There's a warm welcome for people travelling to Wales who come from parts of the United Kingdom where the virus is still suppressed. What is not sensible is for people who live in high areas of coronavirus across our border to travel to those parts of Wales in our holiday areas where the virus is still very effectively suppressed. You can't travel from a country abroad into Wales without quarantining if there are more than 20 people per 100,000 suffering from coronavirus abroad. And yet, from cities in England where the virus is far higher than that,